Or what is it about it that you're even thinking about doing it? What do your friends tell you? Why do they do it?
Until you allow yourself to actually verbalize, people can give you some positive energy back.
What that meant is they need to know that every emotion was okay. Nothing was ever inappropriate.
Hello, friends. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Success Factor. I'm the host, Trent Christensen. In this episode, I had the opportunity to interview Clint Hatton. His stories are remarkable. He has gone through more challenges in life and negative moments and horrible experiences than really anyone that I've ever really interviewed, enough to last several lifetimes. But that being said, he is a strong individual. The way that he handled some of his turmoil within his family and his emotional intelligence is off the charts. Really easy to talk to him. Felt like I was talking to a brother. He's got a lot of wisdom. He's written a book called Big, Bold, Brave. You can find it on Amazon. He's also got a website about Big, Bold, Brave. He coaches, he works with a lot of individuals, helping them navigate through their challenges. And he's an amazing speaker. His stories have refined who he is and helped given him a broader perspective. I really enjoyed interviewing Clint, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you. So I want to talk about the meth. How did you get yourself out of that situation? Like, how long were you using? How far down that rabbit hole did you get? Were you living on the street? Like, give me some more details about that.
Right. Yeah. And that's a great question too, Trent, because, most people have something in their mind when they hear that, right? My prejudice towards that would be where I grew up, I would immediately pictured some white dude with a bunch of tattoos, with rotted out teeth, with all three of his belongings and his bicycle pushing himself through the park. That's what meth use kind of looked like. But that wasn't my story at all. I started abusing pretty young with just various kinds of drugs. Like I said, around 12, 13, that's when it started. But meth started at 21 years old because I'd gotten in the car business. I was actually a car salesman. And then that lasted for 9 years. As far as the rabbit hole goes, I had a couple of wake up calls that you would have thought would have made me stop, but didn't. Really, three that I can think of that were pretty vivid. A couple of times were, when we would do meth, we would also drink a lot. And the myth is that it would keep you wired and you could drink, 20 rum and cokes and still be, functional. And I got in two different instances over the course of a couple of years, I got pulled over late at night and given the full field sobriety test, the whole 9 yards, and passed and walked away from it. And in both those cases, I remember thinking, man, I am so, first of all, I'm lucky I was alive, right? It was just dumb stuff, dumb decisions to ever get in a car. I'm lucky I didn't kill myself or hurt someone else while I was driving. Then I was lucky that I never got a DUI. And then the real one that should have woken me up, but it didn't, was I was a car salesman and I'm literally on a test drive with a guy. And we're driving in the car. He's actually driving at this point. I'd hand, him the keys and I'm in the passenger seat. And I'm just telling him something about the features, whatever we were talking about. But I'd just gotten off of a 3-day binge, which was pretty common for me and the group of guys that I work with, because we worked a lot of hours in the car business. But once a month, our team, we would get off on a Thursday night and not have to be back until Monday morning. And it was not uncommon for us to not even go to sleep.
That's
from
crazy.
Thursday night until Sunday night.
How long did you live like this?
It was almost 9 years. I'm talking to the guy and you know how you're noticing, just you're driving by certain things. We had the same route we took over and over. And all of a sudden I'm talking and then moments go by and I open my eyes and I realized I had stopped talking and I had blacked out for about what probably was like 2 minutes. And the guy didn't seem to notice because he was probably not wanting to listen to the car salesman babble anyway, but it was scary, right? So I actually stopped for a little while, but then I would use and then I would stop and then I would use. And then at 30 years old, I was about a year shy of when we would end up getting a divorce in that first marriage. My wife and I both decided at that time, hey, let's go get some stuff, So we went and got meth and we did it. And I woke up the next day, Trent, and it's not like I felt different than every other time because, anybody that ever has done something like that, you always wake up feeling like crap, always. But that particular morning, I just remember I woke up, I felt cruddy. I was just so disappointed, and we'd wasted a couple of hours even trying to get the stuff, just all the weirdness that goes with being a meth
Yeah.
user.
Yeah.
And I just made a decision that day. I'm like, this is not who I want to be. This is not the type of life I want to live. And so I'm done. I'm never doing meth again. And I didn't. And that was it. And that was 27 plus years ago.
How
So
did
I
your
quite
body respond? Like, how was
didn't
how
have an issue.
was you had no withdrawals?
I really did not. I had no withdrawals. I just walked away from it.
Do you crave it now?
Now, no, no, never. But I will say this too, to be fair, because, we're talking 27 years down the road. Not that that stuff was good back then or that it wasn't dangerous. It was. But the stuff they make now is kind of a whole other level too. And so, it's easy for us to look at people who are battling that now and how fast they can go into a spiral and just how dark that can get quick. It's not a completely fair comparison because the stuff back then wasn't quite as potent as it is now. But no, I didn't. I really didn't. I was done and that was it. Now I had plenty of other issues, plenty of other issues, and I still abused alcohol. But the meth, I was just done. It was over for me and it
Mm,
stayed that way.
mm. Wow. You're lucky. That's a
I
remarkable
know.
story too.
Yeah.
And you're right. The meth is totally different now. The fentanyl that they're shipping across the
Oh,
border is so extremely potent. Like there was an article about it recently, and they had a picture of what it used to look like, how many grams it would take to, knock you out, kill you OD. And back in like 1990 or something
mm,
compared to today. You could barely even see the dot on the picture, and that's how much now today would kill you versus the
yeah.
20 granules of sugar size meth in 1990. That
Yeah.
is a tremendous amount of potency.
It's super scary. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's crazy. How do you see that impacting the kids today? Like, you're a father,
Mhm.
um, I'm a father. What are you seeing in terms of the society today and some of the shifts with drugs, marijuana, the potency of meth? How have you experienced, these kids having issues with that? And what do you think we could do about it?
Yeah. Well, it's a massive issue. I think back in my day, we're talking when I was first doing it in high school, this is like the early to mid 80s. Then by the time I got into real heavy meth use, we're talking the 90s. So culturally, obviously, things were a little bit different, but you still had plenty of drug use. You still had ease of accessibility. Today, it's that on steroids. It's just gone through the
Mhm.
roof. My oldest son right now just graduated. He graduated a little early, so he'll walk in May, but he graduated in December. The school he goes to here in Texas is pretty good size. It's about 3,000 students. So it's a big school. And, vaping specifically with THC. And then you start talking about mushrooms and meth and all this other stuff too. It's really prevalent. And we live in a pretty affluent area, but
Yeah.
we're fighting drugs just like anybody else. And to me, the scary thing about it now is it's even more accessible and like if you look at THC, for example, the THC that they're able to get now compared to me smoking a joint back in the 80s and 90s is also night and day,
Mhm.
much more potent and easier for them to hide, because we had to be careful, right? Because of the
Yeah.
the stink,
Yeah, of
and
course.
now they're putting in these devices and they're smoking it in open public and you don't even know, in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. So there's that. There's the fentanyl thing that you mentioned is also very scary because you never know when it's going to be in one of these things. Nobody knows where the stuff's getting sourced. So it's a real problem. It's a real
Mhm.
problem. And it doesn't matter where you are. I'm convinced of that. I think you can get fooled into thinking you're living in an affluent area and you can just talk your kids out of it, but that's not what happens. So as far as a solution goes, I think first, like I think anything, parents got to be educated. You've got to have a clue. And so many parents get so locked into just their jobs and the day to day, and they just don't take the time to learn about what's really going on. So I think just being aware that it's everywhere is number one. You've got to be aware the stuff's happening. Number two, you got to be willing to have a lot of conversations. So we talk to our boys all the time about this
Mhm.
kind of stuff. And if there's a situation that comes up with someone we know, or they, my oldest has done some dumb stuff,
Mhm.
so we'll sit there and we'll have real honest conversations about it. I think another thing is, and this is just my approach, Trent, we used to say when I was a kid, oh, you're hanging out with the wrong crowd, right? And
Yeah.
that's how I got into drugs, because I was hanging out with the wrong crowd. To which I say, well, if I hang out with that crowd for very long, I am the wrong crowd, right?
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we, as parents, we try to make it sound like it's about the other kids. you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, if
Yeah.
it wasn't for them, my good kid wouldn't be doing it. Well, wake up,
Yeah.
So we have a lot of conversations about, okay, so tell me, what is it about you? What is it about you liked? Or what is it about it that you're even thinking about doing it? What do your friends tell you? Why do they do
Yeah.
it?
You got to
Just
have the
ask.
conversation. Yeah.
You do. You really
Yeah.
do. And then with that, you got to talk about, and again, they're kids, so they're not going to think the way we think yet, right? They don't understand fully how many consequences can happen from drug use, whether it's sudden death or it's you get arrested and it goes on your record and could change the rest of your life in terms of opportunities.
So, Clint, like with going through meth and recovering from that, and like you were on it for so long, and at the beginning you mentioned all the other issues you have going on. You also, I don't even know if you mentioned it, but you have lost a son who is 17, right?
Right. I have two other sons, nine, or excuse me, now they were 9 and 14 when Gabriel passed away. They're 18 and 13 now.
I'm sorry for your loss. That's I can only
Yeah.
imagine
Thank
what
you.
losing a child is like. I have 5 myself, and
Wow.
I couldn't imagine. But one thing's for certain, I know for sure is we as humans can overcome so much more than we realize, and we can come from back from where you think you're at the depths of despair with no hope and no positivity in terms of internal emotion and trauma and death. How have you been able to climb out of that? What were some of your techniques that you used or
Yeah.
had to use, or how did you adjust so that you can climb out of these negative moments in your life?
Yeah. Well, I think I would need to backtrack just a little in our marriage, because I do believe that part of our journey and the way that we handled some of the challenges that we had earlier before Gabriel's accident definitely aided us in being able to process something as tragic as his death. And we don't need to take a lot of time to do that, but just for example, my wife has really struggled with having healthy pregnancies. So Gabriel, who was the oldest, he was born 6 weeks early at about 3 pounds 8 ounces, because she had preeclampsia, which is extremely high blood pressure. So they needed to go do a C-section to, really save both of them potentially. So that happened with him. Then, so you just learn how to cope through that situation, because it's scary, right? So that was just
Yeah.
the first blip on the radar. We also suffered a miscarriage shortly after that. So that was really hard, and with that, again, I think our faith is a factor for sure and definitely helps some. But I think just talking it out, and neither one of us, buried the reality of that situation. And I had to be, even more sensitive towards her side of that, because she's the one who actually, has the baby inside of her, and had to have the DNC when they, remove the baby, and it's just an awful thing, and so many people have suffered through that. So, but we got through that, right, and we kept moving on. And then later on, my middle son goes full term, Trent. So we're like, yes, finally, yeah, an easy one. And then I go into the room with Joel, who's the middle, and the nurse, and we're cleaning him up, and I'm doing that whole deal. And all of a sudden, they come in with a clearly not panic, because it's a professional medical staff, but I could see concern on their face. They're like, "Can you come with us?" And they rush me off to the waiting room, or the recovery room where she was, and she wasn't coming out of the anesthesia. And it was a really scary, probably solid hour or so, where they had me helping, trying to keep talking to her and keep holding her hand and squeezing, and just, not allowing her, because she wanted to just go back to sleep and wouldn't come out of it. So another scary situation, right? So you have these bumps and these bruises. My third son was born at 3 months early,
Oh
27
my
weeks,
gosh. Wow.
at 1 pound 14 ounces.
Holy cow.
So as a family, we got the two older boys. like at that time 8 and 5, I think. And for 2.5 months, every day we're driving 30 minutes each way to go down to the hospital to take milk, to go spend a little bit of time with Liam, who's in this cubicle thing, and meanwhile, they're just sitting out in the lobby because it was H1N1 virus during that time. It wasn't COVID back then, it was H1N1. So for 2.5 months, my wife and I were the only ones who could even see our youngest son Liam. Even the boys couldn't see him. So as a family, we had to adjust to those things, and we had to figure out a way to get a rhythm. And even though those don't even compare to losing a child, they were still just tough times that we had to get through. Even years later, after that, in 2012, my wife suffered a spiral fracture of her femur while we were out on a lake wakeboarding. And so she
Wow.
ended up not being, of course, she had to have major surgery, couldn't even put her foot down and drive a car for 5 months. So the boys had to learn how to work as a team to not jump on her, to help clean up, to make their own breakfast. So there was just some smaller challenges in life that melded us together as a family to where we just worked together as a family really well. And so fast forward to losing Gabriel, now that's a whole other animal. But I think we had that advantage that we had been through some stuff. We had the advantage that we had helped a lot of people with some of their tough times, and we had seen some coping mechanisms that didn't work very well. So trying to get right back into, the here and now, the morning of, there was two decisions we made that were really critical to us being able to move forward in as healthy as way as possible. The very first one was I set the boys down. They had no idea what was going on that entire night. They were in
Mhm.
bed. So we knew he went down at 8 p.m., whole bunch of nightmarish misinformation, crazy night until 3:30 in the morning when we found out he was indeed gone. So the boys come out at 7:30 in the morning. They don't know what's happened. I've got to tell them. I call it the impossible conversation. I let them
Mhm.
know. They of course cry and scream and all the things you can imagine that would happen. And then I sat with them and I said, listen, boys, we have two choices. We can choose what I call a life or a death mentality. I said, if we choose to focus on his death, the tragedy of it, that he was flying a plane and, what if he never became a pilot, all the things we're going to miss. If that was our focal point, I told them we're not going to be who we were created to be. We're going to be a shadow of ourselves because we're going to be trapped in our pain. But there's a second choice that's life. And for us, what that looked like was Gabriel's a real go getter. And so he lived life like it's supposed to be lived, like it's an adventure. Like there's always something new to conquer, like there's always something exciting to pursue. And so I told him, we're going to focus on how he lived his life. So we're going to live that way. And it's going to look different. We're into different things, different gifts, different talents, different passions, but we're going to do that. And then the second piece was we're going to grieve together. So it doesn't matter from day to day because you don't know when you're going to go through something like this.
Yeah.
Heck, I mean, I say day to day, even hour to hour in the beginning stages. And so you may be angry and just pissed off at the world and at
Mhm.
God and whoever. You may be really sad and need to cry. You may feel fatigued and tired and you don't even know why. I mean, there's so many different ways that grief manifests in your body and in your mind and even in your spirit. So I just told them we're going to do it together. So what that meant is they need to know that every emotion was okay. Nothing was ever inappropriate. So if you think we're feeling great and we're all jovial, but you're really sad and you're upset, talk to us about it. It's
Mhm.
okay. If you're angry, talk to us about it. If you need to find, there is no answer why, really. I mean, that's a question we all ask, right? Why us? Why
Yeah.
did this happen? I settled that one. And this doesn't work for everybody. I understand that it's not a one size fits all. But I settled the why question, Trent, because I asked myself this question: what answer could I be given that would be, oh, okay, I get it. So that's why
Yeah.
he had to go. There isn't one.
Yeah.
There's no answer that makes it okay that we lost him at 17 years old. So we just did that as a family, and it's been a pattern that we've had. Not perfectly, by the way, not perfectly at all. We've had to we've used that to recalibrate, right? It's
Mhm.
like we may have went a few days and didn't talk, or you could tell someone was just kind of carrying it physically. All right, hey, let's sit down, let's talk about it. How are you feeling? What's going on? But I think Trent, the Keys to that that may have even been more important was asking that really courageous conversation when it looked like everyone was doing okay. Because a lot of times that's what happens. People just kind of push it down a little bit, and then you may see them go throughout the day, and it seems like they're jovial, and maybe even they're having fun that day, and everything seems to be kind of fine, and it may not be. And so we would ask ourselves, like for example, I may sit down with my wife in the evening, and maybe we've had a great week, but I would just ask her, hey baby, how are you doing with Gabriel? Is the way we would phrase it. And there were times where it'd be like, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Mhm.
Missing him is a no-brainer, right? We miss him every day. But there'd be times where I'd ask that question where it seemed like everything was okay and she would immediately break down. And then vice versa. Sometimes I would, just be pressing on and trying to be the leader of the house and, okay, everything's okay. Everything's okay. And then I would get asked the question and I would just respond with my real emotions. And I call that courageous because a lot of times people don't want to ask those questions in those scenarios because they're afraid. They're afraid of the answer. They're afraid that if I'm doing good and I ask you and you're not doing good, is that going to send me in a spiral? Or if it's the reverse, I'm feeling great and you clearly look like you're going down a spiral, but if I go down there with you, then who's going to be here that's going to be healthy? And you can't live it that way. You've got to do things in the open when you're suffering through a tragedy like this as a family. So those were two really key things that we have consistently, not perfectly, but have consistently done that 3.5 years down the road have served us.
I mean, first of all, it's incredible. I think you demonstrated extremely high emotional intelligence with those decisions and those actions you took with your family. My first question is like, how did you learn all of that? Because a lot of people don't know what to do. They don't know how to regulate. They don't know what is best for their physiological kind of healing, growth, learning, and developing their love for themselves, but also embracing those traumatic, moments like death. How did you learn all this?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because I should have said something like that, knowing that there's so many listeners right now that this may be a tough conversation for them to listen to, because some of the stuff
Absolutely.
they've been through. I do think that we had an advantage. And I'm not talking about the advantage I just gave a moment ago where I was talking about we've just been through some stuff. I also had the advantage of being a pastor for 17 years, and not because I had the title pastor, but my role was I was heavily involved in the coaching and mentoring of people. We were involved in marriage and family ministry during most of those years, helped a lot of people through crisis situation, whether it's with their marriage, and in some cases where someone either lost a child or lost a loved one or whatever. So that was a benefit in that I had had a lot of practice, if I could say it that way, of helping people through situations and seeing what does and doesn't work and seeing patterns of faulty coping mechanisms that didn't serve people very well. But on top of that, and it's part of the reason why I became a pastor for those years and then also now as the personal development coach, because there's not a huge difference. It's more so just I'm helping a wider variety of people now. And that is I've been a lifelong learner. I think the greatest coaches in the world are the ones who don't think they know everything, and
Mm.
they're constantly learning. So I've always been really enamored with self growth since I had that experience at about 31 years old. And so, I've over the years, I read books. I love neuroscience and quantum physics. And, I'll read psychology books, even if I don't necessarily agree with certain ways that they view things, there's things you can learn from that. And so, I think probably compared to some people, that was an advantage because I really lived that kind of stuff. I researched that kind of stuff. The challenge obviously is putting it into practice when the rubber hits the road and it's actually real for you. But I think we talked a little bit about my marriage. We've had an incredible ability to communicate. We were friends for quite a while before we ever got married, so we developed a pretty healthy communication pattern early on. And then through just the different things we've done throughout the years, and she's also a lifelong student of personal growth, we've grown as people. And so being able to, have that as a foundation is a pretty huge advantage too. I can't even imagine how tough it is for people that are already in a really bad marriage and they're not communicating and they're you're just struggling with that. And then to have something like this hit has got to be just catastrophic. But, I just, for me, I've just loved personal growth. I don't want to be the same. If you and I were to have a conversation a year for 5 years from now, gosh, I hope I've grown, you know, but that takes work, man. It
Yeah.
doesn't happen by osmosis. You gotta get some really great people around your life, right? So
Yeah.
I invite mentors into my life. I just put out a newsletter last week, and one of the things I talked about is, do you have to be the smartest person in the room? There's a part of my life where I liked at least thinking I was the smartest person in the room. I don't care about that anymore. I put myself in environments where people think differently and are probably much smarter than me and stuff like that too, because it helps you learn, it helps you grow and expand as a human being. And I think all those things definitely play to your advantage when you go through something really hard, like a tragedy like this.
I would totally agree with you. We had 2 stillborns. We had one at 23
Oh
and one at
gosh,
22
I'm sorry,
weeks.
man.
Yeah, thanks. We had to bury them, deliver them. It was the first one was the hardest thing I had ever gone through at that point, and then the second
Right.
one was, like, faith testing. Yeah, like, where's God? Like,
Yep.
really?
Yep.
You know, like, twice now? It's like getting struck by lightning twice almost. But one thing I was gonna say that I can resonate with you on is I think for me, at least when I've gone through similar trials and challenges and other people that like yourself that have gone through these horrific, life events is the compassion you need to give yourself and the
Mhm.
love we need to give ourselves. Because some people don't even have anyone else that they can mourn with or they can,
Right.
hug daily or even connect to, and you were fortunate to have a wife, a
Yes.
partner that you can lean on when you needed it and vice versa, and then same with your kids. And above all, the to the degree that we love ourselves is the degree that we can love other people. And so
Absolutely.
we have to be able to understand that these challenges and these um, unfortunate events, these traumatic moments are part of human experience. And once we get past that and expand our consciousness, but our perspective, the love for ourselves will increase too, because you'll realize that you can get through almost anything in life,
Yeah.
really anything until it kills
Yep.
you.
Yep.
But yeah, self love, man. Like you got to love yourself. You got to appreciate who you are and keep going because there's a purpose.
You really do. Yeah. And you brought up something we should probably delve into just for a second, because as you stated, there's so many people out there who may not have that support network.
Mhm.
And I agree with you 100%. It starts with you first. It always will. I think sometimes there's this misnomer that that now means being selfish. And that's couldn't be further from the truth, because the reality of it is, as you just said, you can't fully love other people if you don't have a sincere, genuine love for yourself. You can't have healthy relationships and boundaries if you yourself don't have personal relationships and boundaries, right? But if you don't have healthy people around you, that's going to be a real difficult road. And so, one of the things that when people ask me about, well, what would you, if you could help someone today, what would you do? You've got to go find someone. You have to. You can't allow yourself to be isolated. So whether you go to a licensed therapist, or if you're religious and you have whatever it is, if it's a pastor, if it's an imam, whatever, just someone that you can trust to go talk to, you've got to go do that. You've got to try and find some friends. Go to places that you can find healthy friendships, right? That's probably not going to be the nightclub. you
Mhm.
know I mean, it's possible, but it's probably not going to be the nightclub. But maybe you need to start going to like local clubs, if you're into books, or business networking groups. There's so much of that kind of stuff now. And meet people, because you do have to love yourself, but at some point you got to start loving other people too. And those two things really work together. They really do.
Totally. Because I think our human existence is about connection. And I think love is the root of that. If you love yourself, you have capacity to love other people. But we are living here on this earth. with other people. And there's a reason for that. And one of the biggest aspects of life is connection. It is reaching out or building
Yeah.
relationships or opening up, serving, loving, or letting other people love you when you need it or helping you in your moment of need. It is that connection and those relationships that really define the purpose of life in my eyes.
I couldn't agree with you more. I like to say, and it's on my website, there's three things that I believe about every human being. I believe we were created to be courageous. And what I mean by that is I believe courage is actually already in there. It's not something you need to like find or manufacture. It's in there. Now you may need somebody to
Mhm.
help you pull it out, or a situation may pull it out. And then the second one is that we have a creative genius. And I could explain that one in more detail. We don't need to get in the weeds on that, but I believe we have a creative nature in us to be able to solve problems and to be able to come up with creative solutions. But the third one is we're created to be compassionate. And even with this heavy topic that we're talking about right now with losing my son, one thing I've really discovered, especially in this last roughly 60 days, once I published the book and I started doing these types of interviews, I've done quite a few now. And I've really discovered, man, there's so many compassionate people out there. And so even if you are or feel like you're alone and you're struggling to go through something like this, you really don't have to. I mean, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and I'm sure there's lots of other places, I've discovered that depending on, if you lost someone to cancer, if you lost a child like I did, or maybe you're struggling with PTSD because you got out of the military. I mean, whatever it is, there's a lot of really great people out there, really compassionate people. And I think what happens is, you've went through what I consider to be that's incredibly traumatic, losing two children that way. It's very traumatic. Your compassion level went through the roof for other people that have suffered through that. I don't even have to ask you a question. I know it did. And it's the same thing for me. I feel like when you've gone through a tragedy, if again, if you're intentional about grieving well and making sure that you love yourself and that you're doing the things to keep your emotional and your mental and spiritual intelligence high, then when that compassion kicks in, you're going to want to do something to help people. And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help. So if you're out there listening right now and you're struggling, you can reach out to me. If you've lost a child or something like that, reach out to me on my website. But there's so many sources out there where you can find compassionate people who aren't going to try and tell you, hey, I know what you've been through. I went through exactly the same thing. They're not going to do that, but they're going to be really compassionate and maybe give you some really great insight into how you can change your life and walk this out in a healthier way.
Yeah. And it is fuel, it's energy. When you allow people the opportunity to share their positive energy with you in your moment of negative energy, it will start to outweigh the negative energy.
Yeah,
But you
absolutely.
have to allow people to see the negative energy so they know where to put their positive energy. It's as simple as that in my eyes.
Yeah.
Some people don't talk, some people don't post, some people are afraid to be vulnerable and authentic and be like, "This is what I just went through. I am suicidal. I can't handle this. This is it." But if you keep that internally, you'll probably end up committing suicide
Right.
until you allow yourself to actually verbalize or type something um, about what you're going through, then people can give you some positive energy back.
Yeah. No,
That
that's right.
helps you a lot. Yeah, this is it, I mean, first of all, super unfortunate, super sad. I'm super sorry for your family. I sympathize with, the pain and grief that you without question will have the rest of your life and you've already
Yeah,
gone through.
that's right.
Um, Now, what switching gears a little bit here in life for you, Clint, how do you define success? What does
Mm.
it mean to you?
Boy, and that's been something that has definitely changed over time. For me, my first, I don't really explain it this way, but I'm just going to say it this way today. My highest level of success is who I am as a person. To me, that matters first and foremost over anything else. And so, specifically what I mean is when I'm dead and gone, Trent, and I actually have an exercise in my book, and I've done this in some of my talks where I recommend people write their own eulogy, which sounds a little morbid, right? I mean, it can, but the point is if you don't start thinking about how you want to be remembered, you're leaving a lot of things up to chance. So for me, the highest level of success is I want to be first and foremost known as a man who loved his bride well. My marriage has always been and always will be a number one priority for me, followed obviously very closely by my children and how they see me, not the things I do or accomplish, how they see me as a human being. Am I kind? Am I loving? Am I generous? Am I honest? Do I have integrity? When I say I'm going to do something, do I follow through on it? And if I screw up, was I the type of person that's willing to admit it and ask for forgiveness or say I'm sorry or whatever it happens to be? And the ultimate goal to me is when somebody looks back on my life and thinks about Clint, that they would go, you know what? I was better off for interacting with that human being. That's to me the ultimate level of success, you know. And then of course, there's other things too. It's important to want to
Amen to
leave a
that, brother.
legacy. Yeah,
Yeah,
come on.
amen to that, brother. That's amazing because it's not how you define yourself. It's not should numbers in your
Right.
bank account. It's not the cars or assets you have. It's not how many likes you have on TikTok. What it is the view that other people have of you that matters
That's
because
right.
you could have had a negative impact or a positive impact. And if they look back and think, wow, that guy was so positive, loved him every minute I knew him, that's a legacy you want to build. And that takes effort. That takes,
It does.
energy and time to help people and to connect and be present. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you have to take risks too, right?
Yeah.
You
You got to
can't
make yourself
play.
vulnerable, open up your heart. Yeah.
And even maybe try stuff that, I that's another thing for me, especially with the inspiration of Gabriel in our life and where the name Big Bull Brave even came from and all that stuff is I know I want to live the rest of my life, not risking dumb things. I'm not going to, for me, I'm 57. I'm not going to probably jump off a 200-foot cliff at this stage. It'd be okay if I did, I'm sure. But I'm talking about taking risks of living your dreams and going deeper in a relationship, going deeper in a friendship, taking those risks that enrich your life because you're a better person for not staying static and being, living a life of mediocrity, or in some cases, not just not growing, but actually regressing because you just think you know it all already and you've experienced everything worth experiencing. To me, it's all of that. And we got to be willing to take risks. And that's why I launched the book. That's why I'm talking about all that stuff I'm doing. Because COVID, I don't know, we don't need to get into that too deep, but COVID happened 3 months after Gabriel passed away.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So you
So
had back to back like major life situations going on. That's insane.
exactly. So from a pain standpoint, the two don't even compare, right?
Yeah.
And I want to be very sensitive. Obviously, there were a lot of people that lost loved ones during COVID. So that's a very real thing. But a lot of the other stuff that went with that and just the fear and what I'm not talking politically or any of that kind of stuff. It's just we all know there was a lot of fear. There's so many people now that are suffering from suicide has gone through the roof, depression has gone through the roof. And I think it goes a lot back to what you said earlier, is human connection is the most valuable thing in our life. And so many people lost that for a period of time, and it's having an impact. So we were going through all that at the same time. And so, as we started come out of the COVID thing, we're like, we refuse to give in to fear. We refuse to even allow, and again, I'm not talking about politically, but to allow other people to dictate, how our life is going to go. We're going to do everything we can in our power to do the things we want to do. And where we can travel, we're going to go travel. I mean, everywhere we could go travel during that season, we went, we lived life because we don't know there's a tomorrow. And I know not everybody's going to feel good about what I just said. And some may feel like I'm pointing the finger at others. I'm not. I'm just saying when you lose a child, it becomes very, very vivid to you. We're not guaranteed tomorrow. And I just don't want to waste any more time. And I don't think anybody else should either.
Now, the thing I keep thinking of, and you're totally right, and I agree with everything you're saying, and no one else should go like have to deal with that. But my question for you is if you hadn't lost Gabriel, would you have that
Mm,
perspective today?
that's a great question. To the degree I do, probably not. Probably
So would
not.
you argue that in order to grow and to learn so that you have that knowledge for the eternities or however long you believe you're going to live after you die,
Right.
that experience and that perspective and that life altering, mindset altering, and heart altering moment actually morphed you into someone stronger that you are today?
Without question, I would not hesitate to say growth requires pain. Growth requires pain. Now, I would never have chosen, I joined a club I didn't want to join. That's not the method of pain I would have ever chosen. But for us, that's just part of our story. And what it did, Trent, I can be really specific with that with me because I already told, your listeners that Gabriel was very adventurous. I realized in looking back on his life for that next year or two of the grieving process after he first passed away, just how brave he was in everything that he really wanted to do. And that I had courage. I was brave in pockets of my life, but there were other pockets where I was a coward.
Mm.
And I called myself that, and we're men, most men, if you want to get in a rumble, get about 6 inches away from a man and say, you're a coward. All right. I mean, it's an offensive fighting words kind of term, right? But it was true. It was totally true. So it was literally in his death that I had to learn the lesson that there were pockets of my life where I lacked courage. And part of it was stepping out and eventually writing a book. I'd thought about writing a book for years. Part of it was launching the personal development company. I've talked about that for years. And then there's some other things too, just little adventures we went on and stuff like that too. Things that I had not done up to that point when he was still with us, that it was the pain of his death and realizing the way he lived that exposed my cowardice and forced me to confront it. And either I start to walk it out and live by my own words that I'm not going to live that way anymore, or I don't.
Mm.
And we chose
That
to.
is that is so profound, Clint. And I think like my perspective on everything that you just said is you cannot grow unless you go through these moments in life.
Yeah.
And so if you look at these moments as very negative from a like a victimization perspective, it's easy to adopt that socially present and acceptable mindset that's all over the world today about victimization.
Yeah.
Everyone's a freaking victim. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter what you think or
Yeah.
believe, you're going to be a victim somewhere. But
Yeah.
it's a mindset. If you focus on that negative event and how it victimized you, you are withholding and marginalizing and blockading the growth that can come from that experience. Instead of embracing it, you're hiding from it.
Yeah.
And so it's a
Yeah.
state of stagnation because you're not allowing that growth. And so for me, I look at these negative things as well as positive things, great, joyous moments, births of children. You have 2 kids, I have 5. Like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go see them play sports all week. They're in all kinds of activities. It's fun. Those
Yeah.
are the moments that also grow me too. And, promotions at work, bonuses, whatever. Doesn't matter what it is, positive or negative. I look at it now as growth.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I think, let me say this too. I'm glad you just said that because, sometimes when you hear our story, and especially if I give you the laundry list over the course of my life, which
Yeah.
would amount to almost 6 decades now, it sounds like a lot, right?
Yeah.
And I don't feel that way. I really never have. You just life has always been, I say a mixed bag, maybe not the best way to say it, but we've had lots of great moments, great experiences, beautiful marriage, beautiful kids, beautiful friendships. I've had promotions, we've had great experiences, fun vacations. We've had all that stuff too.
Yes.
But I think gratitude is a massive, powerful force in this equation that we're talking about. If you
Yeah.
don't mind, I could share a very quick story. It's the darkest moment of my entire lifetime.
Yes,
It
please
happened
do.
very quickly. And I think it exemplifies what we're talking about, that what you said earlier, it doesn't matter what's happened to you. There is a way out, but you've got to make a brave choice. So what happened? One of the just tough things about Gabriel passing the way he did was it's a plane crash. So then the NTSB, which is the federal organization that does the investigations, all that stuff, they take over that whole deal. So we didn't even know when we were going to get his remains released. And I'm not trying to be morbid, but it was a small plane crash, mountainside. Cremation was our only option. We didn't have any other options, but we didn't know when we were going to get his remains because they had to do autopsy and then they were doing all this testing to see if there was something genetic or if he happened to take some sort of substance or whatever. So all this stuff is going on. You don't know. So one day, it's a Wednesday, and the doorbell rings. We worked from home here, so we're here a lot. And probably like you guys, we try to do our part to make sure that Amazon doesn't go bankrupt, right? So we have packages coming to our door all the time. And I look out the security window and it's the FedEx guy. He's got his uniform on. Okay. So I step outside and just before I went to sign the little device that they have you sign to receive the package, I looked down and the box had a biohazard sticker on it. And it had in big block, bold red letters, cremated remains.
Mm.
And I was stunned. And I don't know how long in my head it felt longer than it probably was, but I'm looking at this guy. This is just a young guy just doing his job. But I'm looking at him, I'm thinking, do you have any idea what you're freaking asking me to sign for? And all these thoughts started going through my head. So there was already a switch in my emotions and my spirit, just even seeing it. So I signed for it, went inside, went into the kitchen, and Amaryllis walked up and she just sees it's a package. She's like, "Oh, what did we get?" And I don't remember if I even said Trent what it was. I just turned the box and we opened it and we pulled out his dust and we wept really hard for a while and just held on to each other. And I honestly don't think we talked at all. We just wept.
Wow.
And what ended up happening was this went on for however long it went on. And you can't cry forever. So at some point, Amaryllis just kind of breathed and walked into our master bedroom and she was gone. And so it was me alone with this bag of dust. And Trent, I'm telling you, it was the first time. Now, it ended up being about 3 weeks after his crash, give or take. Up to that point, I had not had to battle what I would consider any apparent depression trying to come my way or a dark cloud or whatever you want to call it. In that moment, I really did. And I began to feel angry. I began to feel like I was on the verge of just going into depression. I literally felt, I know this is going to sound strange to some of your listeners, but I really felt like this physical blanket, just this black cloud coming on me. I mean, I in my body, I just felt heavy. And as that was happening, I really felt like I knew somehow that I had a lucid few seconds to do something about it. And what I did was I began to thank God for me again. I'm a guy of faith. That was where I went, but it wasn't just, praying to whoever God is to you. I began to say grateful things about especially Gabriel. So I said, thank you. Thank you, God, that I had the opportunity to be Gabriel's dad. Thank you for, and I just began to list off and in being very candid with you, the first couple of things I said were more mumbles because I mean, I've got this dark cloud coming on me and I know I'm on the edge of resentment and bitterness and everything else. But as I began to say a couple of grateful statements, my voice just got a little bit stronger. And then I just started to say, I thought of moments in time, thank you for that experience and thank you for this and thank you for that. And as I was grateful, Trent, that cloud, whatever it was, lifted. Like I literally felt the heaviness just completely lift off my body. Now, what's to me compelling about that, and this is all I have to say about that, is that did not remove my pain. It did not remove my pain. I was still in pain. But whatever that darkness was that was just trying to take me down into that rabbit hole and maybe stay there for good and quit leading my family and just give up, whatever it was completely defeated with an attitude of gratefulness. And I've never forgotten that experience. And so, a lot of people talk about the power of gratitude. It's even kind of a buzzword right now, but man, it's a real thing. And I believe it's a force. It's not just, a good word to use. It's a force.
I'm so glad you shared that story. That is a profound moment for sure. I mean, I could feel your energy and emotions as you recount it. Makes me emotional thinking about it and visualizing you and your wife like opening this, UPS package with your son's basically body.
Right.
And it's amazing. I can only imagine. One thing I thought of is when you talked about that blanket and
Mhm.
that dark energy, through my experiences and other people's experiences, I think it's a common thing where I think you subconsciously or within your physiological person have a fork in the road.
Mm.
You can embrace that, right? That negativity and let that
Yeah.
fuel you to go make
Yep.
horrible decisions
Yep.
that may jeopardize yourself or others you love. Um, and continue down that path, which a lot of people do. Or you can allow your cognition to be able to make this switch, and that is embrace the good because this is done. You can't fix it. What
Can't
is
change it.
the
Yeah.
best about it? What am I still blessed with? What do I still have in life? How did this teach me? And that's where gratitude comes from. I
Yep.
love it. And it's from God, really, in my eyes, but
Yeah.
that's how you
Yeah.
cultivate a sense of gratitude. That's how you grow it and get that dark path behind you because it's very easy to take that path.
Absolutely.
And it makes me think of oppressionism too. Have you heard of that?
No, go further with that. I don't think so.
So instead of possession, it's oppressionism. And it's where you're not possessed full time by negative forces or negative spirits or evil spirits, however you want to define it. Um,
Gotcha. Yeah.
but oppressionism, right, is where those negative forces without question are around you everywhere today. There's positive forces and energy too, whether you want to call it spirits or ghosts or I don't really care. But without question, everyone has those different energies. You can sometimes be perceptive to them, but oppressionism is essentially where these negative forces attach themselves in a weak moment to a person because they know that that dark road, that fork in the road is before them. The
Yeah.
grief, the loss, the sense of despair that can cloud your physiological person opens your spirit to potentially oppression by a negative force. That's the root of it. It's almost like we are fighting these a spiritual war as well, fighting off these negative energies, whether we know it or not. And you fought one off too, because oppression happens to people. Have
Yeah.
you ever known someone that's gone through something like you and they chose the dark path and they continue down that
Absolutely.
path? Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Every day. Every
That
day.
negative energy is there every day. It
Yeah.
doesn't go away. And I look
Yeah.
at that as oppressionism.
Yeah. No, I actually, now that I know where you're going with it, I completely agree with that. And I think you said something earlier in our conversation when you were talking about love being, and forgive me, it's not probably exactly the way you said it, but love being the most dominant positive force on the planet.
Something like
Would
that. Yeah.
argue with that, right? But for me, what I believe to be the opposite of love, because everything on this planet, the law of polarity, right? There's an opposite to everything. And for me, the opposite of love is fear. I believe every negative thing, all of these opposing forces that you can think of come out of that. And so when you look at even, you know, racism, some of the gender issues or non-gender or whatever, these different things that we're dealing with nowadays, those to me are all fear based. And when you look through the lens of life through a love base, that's when your answers come. That's where gratitude can come from, that love. And I'm like you, I believe love comes from God. I believe when you have that love lens, then it allows you to see even really difficult situations and not turn it negative to positive exactly, but you can learn how to see the valuable things still remaining, right? The valuable things in life and gravitate towards those versus these other things that want to oppress you. Because I think you're so dead on. You're so dead on. They're everywhere. They're being put out into the atmosphere constantly, and it's up to you which one you grab. Now I choose love.
Absolutely. Totally love it. Amen, brother. That is preach to me. I love it. This is great because I totally resonate with everything you're saying. I mean, love and fear is a primal instinct and reception going back to the existence of, humankind. It
Right.
is something that has been, fear specifically, has been hijacked and leveraged for psychological warfare and control and
Absolutely.
manipulation.
Without
It is
question.
easy to get, a piece of legislation or an initiative or whatever, you know, approved or enacted or executed if you get the majority of the people that have a vote or a say on board with that. And the best way to do that is fear porn. They
Absolutely.
hijack fear. And as soon as you recognize there is nothing to fear but fear itself, then you're allowed to embrace more loving moments and positivity. And it doesn't, things in your life just improve because the fear is the negativity that we can turn off anytime we want.
Yeah, that's right. We could really oversimplify it and just say it's always about 1 to 2 choices, right? You always have 2 choices, but it's
Yeah,
true. It
it is
really
so
is
true.
true.
What's your website?
The website is bigboldbrave dot technically US. I do say bigboldbrave.us because I chose that domain on purpose. I really believe, like what we're doing right now, we're collaborating and
Yeah,
hopefully bringing some value and helping people along the way. So bigboldbrave.us, and that's where they can find out. They can get the book if they want to get the book, the speaking engagements, information's on there, coaching, all that kind of stuff. What I really love too is, I've put some stuff on there. If this story has resonated with you at all, I've got a book trailer video on there where you're going to see just some snapshots of our life, even Gabriel flying his plane. I've got actually some videos of him doing his thing too on there. And I think it's great if people want to go and see a little bit more of the reality of the Hatton's life. But join
awesome.
me there.
And the book is called,
Yeah, the book is called Big Bold Brave: How to Live Courageously in a Risky World.
and where do you find it?
And that you can now, if you live here in the States, you can get the book through my website if you'd like to do that. We probably have some global listeners as well. And if you're outside the US, you'll definitely want to go to Amazon or anywhere else books are sold. So you can get it pretty much anywhere.
Awesome. And you do coaching too. So anyone can come to you and hire
Correct.
you to help them navigate through some of these challenges or issues that they may be struggling with and not sure exactly how to do what you did. And that's survive past it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, cool. Dude, this has been really, really insightful. I loved connecting with you. I loved your stories, your to me, you come across as a mental warrior and a life warrior that has ton of battle wounds, and you're able to look back and teach the younglings how to get past these difficult times and what to look for in the wounds and how to heal them. And I think that's amazing
Yeah,
because that's what we need to get through from just overall society or human to human. The medical system isn't doing us justice, right? And
right.
they're not meeting the mental health implications that we are all experiencing globally,
That's right.
directly, even just related to COVID-19 pandemic, but not just that, but so many other things. And the world is suffering, and we need people like you that can help embrace love, help teach and educate those, individuals. So thank you for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for that. I have a tagline when if people go to my website are going to see it says courageous humans inspiring lives. I
Mhm.
want to leave your listeners with this thought because, I've had the opportunity to share my story quite a bit because I wrote the book and I'm grateful for that. It allows me to carry Gabriel with me as well, which is really healing for me. But that tagline for me is not just some buzzword or some phrase. People tell me, "Gosh, you're really inspiring." Wonderful. I think that's great to a point. But my reason for that tagline is I believe every single human being out there shouldn't just be enthralled with other people's inspiring stories. I think that inspiring story should inspire them to live an inspiring life. And that's why I love what you're doing and the way, your show rolls out. You're giving them a lot of wisdom, you're giving them a lot of tools. that they can really just make a decision that, man, I just don't want to be normal. I want to be someone who lives an inspiring life, and you can make it happen, man.
That's awesome. Yeah, Clint, you're giving me chills, man. Thank you.
That's,
Super amazing human being. I love your energy, your fight, your positivity, your love. Thank you. And you're a great communicator and you're sharing your skills and knowledge and wisdom with everyone. So keep it up, man.
well,
And
thank you, Trent. I really enjoyed it, and I loved your insight, and really learned a lot from you today too.
yeah, thanks. It's mutually understood and mutually felt for sure because you taught me a ton. But thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, thanks, Trent.
All right. See you, man. Bye now.
See ya.